Welcome everybody to Learn Lifelong Education and Aging Resource Network. I am Dee Childers with Life Changes Elder Care Consulting and Vice President of Learn Community Education. And today our topic is managing your mental health during the holiday crisis. We're going to go into our presenters here in just a second. First, to let you know, Learn is, as I said, Lifelong Education and Aging Resource Network. We are an Idaho-based nonprofit organization with a mission to provide community education on aging and caregiving topics. Learn is part of the Leaders Network of the Society of Certified Senior Advisors, and the website is there. The SCSA is an organization that educates and certifies professionals who work with seniors. So always good to look for that designation out of after someone's name that you might be working with. The content today is provided for general informational purposes only and not to be considered legal, financial, or health advice. Please consult your professionals and service providers before taking action based on this information. So today, I would like to introduce our sponsors for this quarter's Learn Live presentations. And our first sponsor today is Peggy Farnsworth. She's the Boise retirement coach and does an excellent job of educating, explaining, and then helping people facilitate planning as well as moving through their retirement journey. And then the Counseling Center. So the Counseling Center is a co-sponsor, Tree City Counselors of Boise, and they also are our presenters today. So welcome, Dr. Lynn Bohecker and Monique Barber, both from the center. And I'm going to let have the two of you do your introductions for me, and then when you're ready to take over the slideshow, because you can bring it up whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Dee. If you're okay, I actually have an About Us page, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Perfect.
You may need to stop sharing, Dee.
Yep.
Okay. Can everybody see that?
Probably not, because I'm still, there we go. There you go.
Okay. So I welcome everybody. I'm Monique from the Counseling Center, and I'm joined today with Dr. Lynn Bohecker. And we both are representing the Counseling Center today as we present this amazing presentation. We're just thrilled to talk about this topic of managing mental health during the holidays. I am a professional, licensed professional counselor with the Counseling Center, a national board certified counselor and a board certified telemental health provider. Currently pursuing my Ph.D. Through Liberty University, and my research interests include, of course, overall wellness, but also looking at how to infuse creativity into supervision and counseling, as well as addiction and multicultural counseling considerations. And I'm joined today by Dr. Bohecker, who is the CEO of the Counseling Center at Tree City Church. Dr. Bohecker earned her Ph.D. in counselor education and supervision from Idaho State University, and she's a licensed marriage and family therapist and an LMFT approved supervisor. She is part of the core faculty at Liberty University, and her research interests include professional identity, spirituality, and religion in counseling, group work, and advocacy. Like I said, we are thrilled to be here today. I'm thrilled to be presenting with my colleague and my mentor, presenting on a topic that is timely and much needed in our world today. Although it's not part of the title, I noticed that you said the holiday crisis. And it's not part of our title, but I think for some people around this time of the year, that might be exactly how they're feeling. So a little more background, Dr. Bohecker and I were co-authors of the Idaho Wellness Journal, as well as two of our clinicians at the Counseling Center, Dr. Martinez and Dr. Henderson, helped us to write this incredible journal, which is forthcoming in print in the new year. And that was in coordination with the Idaho State Department of Education, Indian Education. So this presentation is a culmination of what we did to put together a wellness journal that guided students through identifying how to improve their overall wellness, as well as research that we've all embarked on, our research team, around wellness for caregivers. So it was really neat to combine this, and it does sort of span the lifespan around improving mental health overall. Now, in our capacity here, we are representing the Counseling Center, and at the end of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit more about what the counseling is, what it does, but it is located in the Treasure Valley along Eagle Road between Boise and Meridian, and we are just thrilled to be here today. In today's webinar, we are going to be covering some topics, and I love the way it's written here. It seems like basic feelings, discerning between thoughts and feelings. And any one of these learning outcomes could have been a 90-minute presentation in and of itself. So we have tried our best to really snapshot what we think is going to be really important. So what we hope you take away from this is being able to identify basic feelings, being able to identify how to put a name to a feeling that you're experiencing. And then we'll talk about how to discern between thoughts and feelings. Often those get intertwined. We'll be generating some ideas on how to manage boundaries within the dimensions of wellness and within the holiday season. And finally, you'll take an inventory of your current self-care and identify ways to schedule more of it. Now, at this time, this webinar, like I said, it could have been packed full with us just talking at you. But what we really wanted was for you to be able to engage in some exercises while we present today. And that might be a little bit different than what you're used to, especially on the Zoom platform. So while we're not going to ask you to share, there might be opportunities for you to put something in the chat box. I would invite you now to go get a pen, a pad of paper, any art supplies you think you might like. And I'll let you know that if you engage in the prompts that we'll be giving you, I think you'll have a deeper appreciation for just how you can manage your mental health. So this is experiential. And so at this time, if you don't have them nearby, I'd invite you, we're going to take 30 seconds for you to go gather your pen and gather any supplies you might need to participate. So I wanted to provide a rationale for why we chose the holidays. And the truth is, this presentation is applicable year-round. We recognize, however, that the holidays and the traditions that accompany it often create added stressors that aren't necessarily felt year-round, or it may exacerbate difficult feelings that you already are carrying with you, perhaps like grief or any chronic conditions like depression. So right now, I'd like you to think about the added stressors that you have experienced either in the past or perhaps as we're heading into them, any current stressors you're feeling currently. I want you to make a list of what comes to mind. Now, when you make your list, the way I always ask people to do it is you're going to set your pen to your page. You're going to begin writing, just like a list, okay, like a grocery list. But the difference is you're not going to stop to give it a lot of thought. If a thought comes and this is a stressor, I want you to write it down. And the other thing is not to go back and edit it. So at the end, you'll have this great long list. Well, maybe not so long. I'm only going to give you about 1 minute, and I'll tell you to go, and then I'll tell you when to stop. So at this time, go ahead and make a list of any stressors that are coming to mind from you, either past or present, and go. All right. I know you wrote that list, and maybe now it's in front of you, and that is the intention here of seeing all these stressors. And through the duration of our presentation, it's our intention to help bring you back to a place of calm, especially if now you've noticed that these stressors are on your plate. Perhaps you identified stressors related to family, finances, or pressure to perform. The paradox that we encounter around the social aspect of the holidays is that we may experience intense feelings, and without judging it, difficult, not difficult, just intensity of feelings. It may cause us to not want to be so social. But what we know is that although the holidays are often associated with connection can be really important for our overall mental and physical health. Having human connection helps us to cope with stress, and it buffers the effects of occupational stress on sleep quality, improves mood and overall well-being and life satisfaction. So the purpose of this presentation is to help identify ways that you can manage and maintain your mental health while engaging in activities that often require us to connect with others. And if that's part of your stressors, is perhaps connecting with certain people, we hope that you'll be able to identify ways to help protect and improve your mental health. So I can sort of see some of your faces. I'll just let you know, I did have one of these TVs. This one I think is an earlier generation, but it was a really cool console that I had in my early 20s that looked just like this. And while I realize that most TVs today have a remote control, I still use this analogy where if you notice there's a little clicky thing up at the top, and that's how you used to have to change the TV, is actually get up there and change it. And so as a counselor, I often ask clients to switch the channel in their minds, especially when they feel stuck on a channel that they didn't intend to be on. And I always use the motion. So if you want to bank that, to use the motion of reminding yourself, oh, I've got to click over to a different channel. So for example, I like to watch a show called The Great British Baking Show, which is a lovely, low stakes show with upbeat humor and beautiful landscapes. I usually feel good after watching it. Now I stream it on Netflix, which, like most other streaming services, has an algorithm which tries to learn what I like to watch and offers me other shows. You might like this, you might like that. And it's uncanny how often it thinks that I might like the latest reality show or documentary, many of which I'm just not interested in. Our brain does something similar with that algorithm. We may be thinking about something like the holidays. It might be a low stakes thought, something that brings up positive memories associated with our senses, like pumpkin spice or peppermint. But then, without you really recognizing it, the channel changes, and suddenly you're watching a story in your head that may be filled with stress or pressure. This is the analogy I use with clients when they are replaying stories about the future or about the past in their heads and they feel stuck. I remind them that they're probably on a different channel and it is within their capacity to change it. Now, the disclaimer here is traumatic memories or recent grief. That is actually something happening in the brain that is not going to allow you to switch the channel. So while I'm saying we're going to be learning some tools to help you change the channel, if you find that your experience or whatever the story is too traumatizing, it would be a good idea for you to consult with a counselor or your primary care physician. Before you can change your proverbial channel, you have to learn, it's encouraged that you learn how to notice your feelings. So let's learn more about that now. In the Idaho Wellness Journal, we outline these basic feeling words, and we know that there's thousands of English words to describe how we feel. They are connected to these primary 8, including anger, anticipation, disgust, fear, joy, sadness, surprise, and trust. So we all have feelings, and we can have many feelings happening at the same time. Feelings can also be felt in your body. I find myself singing this song, feelings, nothing more than feelings. And I've never really known how the song goes. I only know that one part, but I had to Google it. It's by Morris Albert, who won a Grammy for that song. And so I think he's minimizing it by saying it's nothing more than feelings. The role that feelings plays in our lives and in our thoughts and in our actions are all intertwined. So as you'll see through this presentation, starting with the identification of the feeling you are experiencing will yield better outcomes than by dismissing them as nothing more than feelings. No offense to Morris. So right now on this cool afternoon, I'd like you to take time to notice and observe how you're feeling in this moment. I'd like you to write it down in your journal. I'll give you some time to do that. And another option, if you pulled out some art supplies, if you don't want to write the word, perhaps find the color that best suits the feeling you are experiencing. So for example, in this moment, I feel trust and joy. And if I were to color it, I might color it with orange or teal. So take a minute now to write down the feeling that you notice you're experiencing in this moment. It can be one of the ones on the screen, or it could be another feeling or multiple feelings. Go ahead and take the time to do that now. Thank you for writing down your feelings, for drawing it. And so right now, I'm going to ask you to engage. I'm going to invite you to engage in an activity or an exercise whereby you will be identifying something or some issue that could come up during the holidays, maybe based on your past experience or something that you're worried about into the future. I would ask you to try to imagine something that's not too upsetting. An example might be, my family may arrive late and the food will get cold. Or my boss will ask me to work overtime my boss will ask me to work overtime if someone doesn't show up for their shift. Or no one will understand how my life has changed since I became a caregiver, and I'm still expected to perform like I always have. Write the situation in one or two sentences right now. We will use this later multiple times. So just spend about a minute to write down those 2 sentences. An issue that's coming up for you that you notice you're worried about or that you've experienced in the past. I would imagine that the one or two sentences that you wrote down might be connected to one of the items on the list that you wrote earlier. Like I said, we will be building on these couple of sentences that you wrote down about an issue that's coming, that you're experiencing some concern or worry about. But let's continue to build. Now that you can identify some basic feeling words, let's look at how our 5 senses can help us to notice our feelings. Bessel van der Kolk wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which highlights how our body stores feelings, memories, events, intergenerational trauma. On the last slide, we identified how you might be able to notice a feeling. Now I want you to consider how you might use your senses and body sensations to notice a feeling. So for example, I am presenting on a live webinar to a live audience, and I notice that my cheeks feel warm. My mouth feels dry. And I do have an oil diffuser going next to me because I really like the smell of lavender. Right now, take a moment to write down what you notice about each sense from where you are located while you're viewing this webinar. Go ahead and just write down one word. Don't think too hard about it for each of these senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What can you feel or touch? What can you smell, and what can you taste? I hope you had a moment to write down one thing that you see, hear, touch, smell, taste. Now let's add on to this now. I want you to connect a feeling word to each of the senses you noticed. So for example, my cheeks feel warm, which surprises me. My mouth feels dry, and I'm afraid to take a drink while I present. The smell of lavender brings back joyful memories, which brings me joy. Take a moment now. As you wrote down each of these senses, I want you to connect it with a feeling word. I'll give you about 30 seconds now. Good work. You've probably noticed that this presentation is going slow, and it's incredibly intentional for you. You've chosen to be here on a webinar that talks about managing your mental health during the holidays. And we couldn't think of a better way than to offer you a reprieve by having a slower webinar for you to join us today. And I appreciate you being here. Now, throughout our presentation, we will be offering you activities. These are things that you can engage in real time, but also you will be getting a copy of the slideshow. These are things that we hope that you'll pack along into your toolbox, or if I use that channel metaphor, you'll make sure that you can switch over to one of these channels, okay? So this first activity is exactly what we just did. We're building on what you just learned. It's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. what this activity does is it brings you back to the present moment. And I'll be honest with you, this morning I did this activity. I needed it. I was preparing for this presentation, and there was a part of me that thought, I need to come back and breathe. And this is what you do. You identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. It doesn't really matter if you do 5 things you can touch or 4 things you can see. So I invite you right now, I will give you 1 minute to bring yourself into this present moment and to engage in this activity. So whether you're seated or whether you're standing up, I want you to notice these things. As you begin this, I'd like you to take 2 slow, deep breaths. And bring to mind 5 things you can see. Bring to mind 4 things you can touch. 3 things you can hear. 2 things you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. Thank you. We've explored what a feeling is. Now, a feeling is something that we experience. We can connect it with our senses. We can connect it with body sensations. Now, I want to discern thoughts. I want to separate thoughts in case those are interchanged with you. A thought is something we think. If you listen to the way we talk in regular conversation, we often use these terms interchangeably. Sometimes we disguise thoughts as feelings when we say, I feel like, and so here are some examples. I feel like making homemade cranberry sauce. I feel like they're arriving late on purpose, or I feel like they take it for granted. And it's the like, when you see the like that follows feel, oftentimes what you're about to say or what you're hearing someone say is their thought. They have not actually landed on what the feeling is. It's important to discern whether or not what you're noticing is a thought or whether it's a feeling. And again, it could be both. I feel like making homemade cranberry sauce is a thought. I want to make homemade cranberry sauce. The feeling might be something associated with joy. Maybe it's a recipe that's been handed down. Let me say it a different way. I want you to imagine that you're on a, not in, but you're looking out on a busy street. For those of you in the Treasure Valley, imagine Eagle Road. That's where our clinic is located, as I said at the beginning. From my office, I can see the traffic that goes by. There's something like 65,000 cars that drive by our clinic every day. Now, interestingly enough, each of our brains processes about 70,000 thoughts per day. So let's say each car going along Eagle Road represents a thought. What we often find ourselves doing when we're in the midst of a busy day is we get in one car, then we swap to another, then to another, and then to another, and so on. We are in the thought. We are on Eagle Road, and we're constantly shifting lanes, shifting cars, okay? What I'm asking you to do by noticing your thoughts and being able to notice what's being phrased and leaving your mouth as you say it out loud is more like pulling out a comfy lawn chair or your favorite camp chair, putting it on the sidewalk of Eagle Road, and staying put while you watch the cars go by. And you observe them. And as you observe them, you notice and you name them. So for example, if we're using the car analogy, there's a Ford that just went by. There's a Chevy. There's a Range Rover. Because of the nature of our minds, we may be really good at doing that at first by noticing the thoughts. And then suddenly we see a Camaro. And instead of saying, there's a Camaro, instead we think, there's a Camaro. I once owned a Camaro. That was in the 90s when I learned to drive and I couldn't barely park it or reach the pedals. I almost failed my driver's test. I failed many things. I wish I'd studied more. So suddenly I left my lawn chair. I saw a Camaro, I jumped in the Camaro, and now I'm off in one direction or the other. I left. And it happened so easily. I was trying to notice the thought, but instead I took off. When you notice that you have done this, all you have to do is gently bring yourself back to the lawn chair. We do that without judgment, and we do it gently with ourselves. We imagine ourselves back in our lawn chair, sipping maybe some hot cocoa and watching more cars go by, just noticing them. That's what we do with our thoughts. And this is called mindfulness. Mindfulness is noticing and observing our thoughts and our feelings without judgment. Mindfulness is an evidence-based practice that helps individuals to learn how to return to the present and be with what is happening moment to moment with a sense of curiosity, kindness, and compassion. Everything we've done so far has pointed to mindfulness, which is not the absence of thought, but rather it is a focus on the present. Mindfulness allows you to slow down, notice what is happening internally, and then decide on the best course of action. Perhaps it'll be to go for a walk or to have engage in a breathing exercise or some sort of reflective exercise. Without the slowing down, it can be easy to react in ways that are not congruent with our overall heart or values. So now I'd like you to bring to mind the issue you wrote down earlier, those 1 or 2 sentences. I'd like you to write down the feelings that are associated with that issue. If that issue came to pass, how would you feel? Or how do you feel when you read those 2 lines currently now? Now, I'd like you to write down, you've identified what the feeling would be. Now, I'd like you to write down, where in the body do you feel that? Where do you notice that? And finally, what are the thoughts associated? Good work. Now you might be saying, okay, difficult issue. I know my feelings. I know where I'm feeling it in my body, and I know my thoughts. Well, what do I do? And I'm glad you asked, because that tells me you're being very present in this moment. You're very present with the feeling that's coming up with you. Maybe there's an urge of solving this. Let's move on to a couple of activities you could engage in. Once you notice what is happening, you're better equipped to respond in a way that is congruent with your values. Now, when it comes to identifying values, there's a link in here, and I can later on put it in the chat box as well, or you can Google it based on Miller and Rolnick. But I think it's really important in order for us to identify where we've gone astray with remaining value focused is to identify your values. So what I'd like you to do, you've written down the issue, you've written down the feelings, the thoughts, the body sensations, and now one more thing to add to it. What is the value that seems to be feeling a rub here? Maybe it's family. You really value your family, or you value your autonomy, or you value relationships. Take a moment and just write down the value associated. What you can do when you are feeling, yes, that's my value. I know why this is feeling uncomfortable for me, is you can choose to do something that's self-soothing in the moment. Self-soothing is something that will help you in the moment. Later, we're going to talk about self-care, which is different. It's broader than self-soothing. Self-soothing may include walking, breathing, or spending time reflecting, perhaps in a journal or doing artwork. Other self-soothing measures that may actually be unhealthy might be avoiding. Avoiding in the moment might feel very self-soothing, or imbibing, drinking, engaging in some other behavior that is not congruent with your values. So just noticing the self-soothing activity you choose, making sure that is in line with your values and that it does actually produce results of feeling some relief. So here on the slide, we have, like I said, walking, breathing, or mindful reflection. Okay, now you might be saying, but what if I forget all that and suddenly I have to have a conversation with somebody? Well, what do you say then? And in this case, I am glad you asked, because as a counselor, I often help clients to find a formula that will work for them when they're engaging in a difficult conversation. There is no surefire way to being able to win tricky conversations, but this is one method you could try, okay? Now, the first step is to start with your heart. What that means is you want to identify the real reason, and I mean the real reason for what you're about to say. How is that connected to your value? Or how is that connected to your concern, okay? So perhaps your heart and your values are telling you that you want peace at the dinner table. That is starting with heart. An example of not starting with heart would be if your mind is saying, but I'm right, kind of a righteous, I know I'm right. You don't want to start with that, or I want to win. If you find yourself, in that place of, well, I know I'm right, you got to dig one or two steps deeper to identify really where is this touching your heart. Maybe it's a family value, maybe it's concern, okay? And then the second step is to use an I statement. So it might be, I am sad. That's it, I am sad. It's an I statement that tells what your feeling is. The second thing is to state the summary of the issue. And this one I can't emphasize enough. You want to keep it under 1 minute. If anything, it should just be 1 or 2 breaths. Most people, if they're having a difficult conversation, cannot stay connected to the other person for over a minute. So you want to keep this one kind of short. I am sad. This is an example. I am sad because I have a conversation I want to have with you, and I'm afraid it won't go well. 2 feeling words there, sadness and fear, okay? And finally, you state what you need. This might sound like, I'm sad because there's a conversation I want to have with you, but I'm afraid it won't go well. What I need is to have some alone time to talk with you later, Could we go for a walk after dinner? That's the recipe. Could the other person react strongly to that? Absolutely. You run the risk by being vulnerable with your heart. Absolutely. But notice which channel you're on in your mind. If you're on a channel where you already are rerunning the worst case scenario, try to switch to a channel that's more present and open. Remember, evoking curiosity and compassion for the other person. Try to stay on a channel that brings you hope. By using this method of talking to another person in a high stakes conversation, it may actually lower the emotional stakes. Now we're going to move on to boundaries. I'm just doing a quick time check. So in this section, we will explore boundaries. A boundary is a line that marks the limits of an area or the limits of a subject, sphere, or activity. Think for a moment what boundaries mean to you. What do you think a boundary means? And now consider, how do boundaries make you feel? Whether they're your boundaries, maintaining your boundaries, encroaching on other people's boundaries. As we consider boundaries, let's think about the areas in our life where we use boundaries. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, or SAMHSA, put together this chart, which defines the 8 dimensions of wellness. I use this a lot with clients to be able to identify what part of your life is really feeling pressure right now, or are you feeling distressed in? So these include emotional, financial, social, spiritual, occupational, physical, intellectual, and environmental. Your boundaries may cross multiple dimensions. So for example, I may decide I don't answer emails on Sunday. This speaks to my occupational, social, and spiritual dimensions. Another example is setting aside time, which is a boundary in and of itself, once a month to do a craft activity by myself or with a friend. This boundary speaks to my social, emotional, and intellectual dimensions. Oftentimes, our values are going to be very much intertwined with our boundaries. So noticing how your values influence the type of boundaries you have. I'll give you another example. Order and organization is not a value that I particularly hold dear, although I can organize a great spreadsheet. Actually keeping things organized is not something that I'm particularly good at. So I work with an individual at the clinic who, when I walk near her space, I feel an immediate sense of peace. She has organized her workstation in a way that speaks to her values of organization, likely cleanliness. So how do you think she might feel? I'm smiling because I would never do this, but how do you think she might feel if I took her scissors and her stapler and borrowed them and then didn't put them back in the right place? Likely, she would think that I am encroaching on her boundary of having an organized workstation. Now let's consider how she might feel. Well, she thinks that I was encroaching on her boundary. She would be right. But how might she feel? Where might she feel it? Perhaps she'll have a clenched jaw. Maybe she'll ball up her fists. I hope not. Or she'll feel tension in her chest. I hope you see where this is going. We have absolutely connected our feelings, our body sensations, our values into this conversation around boundaries. They all help guide us in a way of being able to tell ourselves something is not right here, and I'm going to take a moment to be in the present moment to identify what it is. So I want you to consider the issue earlier before I turn this over to Dr. Bohecker. You've already written down your value, the feeling, the thoughts, and body sensations associated with the issue you identified earlier. Now consider a boundary you might need in this situation and how you might say it. You may decide to use an I statement. So for example, my coworker might say something like, Monique, I feel disappointed. You moved my scissors and stapler from my desk and did not put them in the same place as you borrowed them. What I need is for you to put my supplies back each time you use them. Okay. Take a moment now to identify how you might phrase that boundary. Write a statement that explains your boundary. Dr. Bohecker, I'm going to turn it over to you now as you describe the different types of boundaries.
Thank you, Monique. As you're talking about boundaries and we're thinking about boundaries, we can categorize them. There are 5 different types that we could really think about and categorize. Boundaries such as physical boundaries, time boundaries, conversational boundaries, relationship boundaries, and personal boundaries. So, for example, physical boundaries are boundaries we set for ourselves to ensure our physical safety and proximity, including boundaries about where and when we go places, what we do, and what we're comfortable with physically from others related to proximity or touch. Time boundaries are what we set to create a healthy mindset and schedule for ourselves. This can include setting limits on how much time we spend with someone or doing a certain activity, setting a time boundary for work, community, school, and home life balance. Conversational boundaries are setting limits about what topics we're open to discussing and what topics we do not feel comfortable talking about. This can include many different topics such as politics, religion, language, and much more. Relationship boundaries are limits that are discussed and agreed upon with your partner, family, coworkers, and friends. Personal boundaries are guidelines and rules we set for ourselves to ensure that we're being aware of our needs and being aware of how we can respect and meet the needs in a healthy way. Now that we know a few different types of boundaries, let's talk about why it's important to have boundaries. So boundaries create guidelines and rules for ourselves and others to understand and follow and respect. So some advantages of setting healthy boundaries can include a healthy mindset, preventing overwhelm, exhaustion, and burnout. Implementing respect into your daily life and good emotional and mental health is really a byproduct of setting healthy boundaries. I'm going to discuss physical boundaries, but feel free to go through all of the different types of boundaries and create your own. So we've defined boundaries as a general description, but then you need to define for yourself each boundary and a boundary that you want to set. An example would be creating a physical boundary with your family members to respect your privacy in your room when the door is closed. Another example would be setting a relationship boundary with a friend that what you want to do is an elbow bump when you are greeting each other rather than a hug and a kiss. Once we have the boundary defined, then we need to communicate that boundary with the person that we want to set it with. So for the examples that we just talked about, it could look like putting a sign up on your bedroom door that says knock before entering or do not disturb. For your relationship boundary, this could look like having a conversation with your friend about what you are and are not comfortable doing. So after we communicate the boundary, then we have to set the expectations with the people, and then develop for ourselves what we're going to do if that boundary is broken. So this could be, for example, refraining to engage with a person that has not respected a boundary that you've communicated, engaging in another conversation, or discussing why these are important, and then what the consequence might be if it was broken again. Boundaries differ from person to person and can always change. Setting your boundaries can be a great starting point to having a healthy relationship with a partner, a boss, a family member, a coworker, and anyone that you engage with. Something to consider is that if we set a boundary and someone has a reaction to it, that we're not responsible for their behavior, their choices. That responsibility lies with them, not with us in setting the boundary. When you feel ready to start communicating your boundaries, start by setting one with one person, and then keep adding from there until you feel safe and comfortable in your daily life. We often learn about how to set boundaries or how not to set boundaries from how we were raised. And there are family values around setting boundaries. And they often fall somewhere on a continuum between we don't talk about feelings and we avoid confrontation, so we don't have any boundaries, to we feel each other's feelings and talk through things often and have very heavy, rigid boundaries. So part of it is, how do we learn how to set a boundary if it's not something that we're familiar with or is a custom that we've learned in our families or in our life? So some phrases that are on the screen here are simple statements that you can say to family and friends or coworkers to help maintain or set healthy boundaries. Sometimes it's very difficult, particularly around holiday season and holiday gatherings. Being asked to more than one party or more than one event at the same time, it's important to be able to say no in a loving and kind way, but that it really isn't going to be able to work. So some of this is engaging in a new vocabulary, and some of them are phrases like what is on the screen. Something such as, let me think about that. Great idea. I would love to. Let me see if I can make this work. Or, I'm sorry, but that's not going to work for me. I'm not going to be able to take that on right now. Thank you for asking, but I'm not able to commit to that right now. I'd love to, but I'm not able to take that on. Also asking for help. I need help with this. You take care of dinner tonight. I've changed my mind. Let's talk about it next month. Or I'm not comfortable with that. Developing healthy boundaries are a form of self-care. So next we're going to be talking about the importance of taking care of yourself. So this is tuning in, stay tuned. I love the analogy that Monique is setting up for us to click to another channel. Right now, it's been a few minutes, so what I would like us to do is, if you're sitting in your chair, stay tight, tighten all of the muscles that you can in your body. So this is a way to stay tuned, because you're going to be tightening all the muscles in your body. And then relax. So that helps us to be present, stay tuned with the activity that we're doing, staying engaged with people. So next, we're going to discuss the importance of taking care of yourself. So if you've ever flown on an airplane, you may recall the flight attendant instructs you to put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. So you may know that this is an important rule for ensuring survival. Why? Because if you run out of oxygen yourself, you can't help anyone else. So this is an important understanding for everyone, but in particular for those who spend a great deal of time taking care of others, or being really busy, or not doing things for yourself. So this includes mothers and fathers and children and grandparents and siblings and doctors, nurses, teachers, husbands, wives. Anyone who is engaging with other people needs to make sure that they are nourished and have the ability to engage because their cup is full. Taking care of others can easily deplete one's oxygen. So if you don't take care of yourself and metaphorically don't fill up your cup or make sure that you have your own oxygen first, you can experience stress and fatigue, burnout, reduced mental effectiveness, health problems, anxiety, frustration, an inability to sleep, or worse. Are you experiencing any of these symptoms? If so, it may mean that you need to replenish your energy by filling up your own cup and replenishing your reserves in order to maintain a healthy life. A healthy life includes engaging in activities that you enjoy, activities that nourish you. So for some, for many, perhaps, in order to take care of yourself, there may need to be a recognition of guilt feelings that often accompany spending time doing something enjoyable. Is that something that you might be feeling? Do you think guilt might be preventing you from doing something that you enjoy? So remember the oxygen mask metaphor. So it may be crucial for you to engage in activities that you enjoy in order to be present and engaged with the people that you love. And what that means is that it's important to recognize feelings of guilt, perhaps, and remove that as an obstacle for you to do things that you enjoy. One way to do that is to change the words. So what I mean is that instead of thinking that doing something you enjoy is selfish, you might consider that what you're doing is to renew your energy. Fill up your cup. Get more oxygen. Depending upon how much energy you expend out towards others, it may be crucial for you to spend time every day in activities that you enjoy, also called self-care activities. So we may hear people say that, but what does it actually mean? So self-care activities renew your mind, renew your body, renew your spirit. So this may include resting, exercising, eating, health checkups, spending time every day on a renewal activity. Activities that can be done within your home might be looking out a window, watching small animals or birds. That might be nourishing to you. That may be enough. Listening to music, calling or Zooming a friend, reading a book, writing in a journal, engaging in a hobby, watching a funny TV show, organizing or cleaning, playing a game with your friends or family. So I'd like you to take a few moments right now to write down what activities can you think of that you can do in your home that you enjoy. And remember, it's not selfish to take care of yourself. It's necessary. Next, we're going to be taking care of what it means to be monitoring your wellness. So taking care of yourself means also that you're evaluating and monitoring your needs, and gauging how full or how depleted you are. There are some evaluation tools linked in this presentation that you can look into to see if they're helpful for your own monitoring. One is called the Professional Quality of Life Scale. The Professional Quality of Life Scale asks questions about your positive and negative experiences of working with others who have experienced stress, such as if you are a caregiver, or if what you do in your daily life is giving to others in some way. This scale has subscales for compassion, satisfaction, burnout, and compassion fatigue. The self-care assessment was adapted from a workbook on vicarious traumatization, and it's in the form of a worksheet. This assessment, in that one, you rate yourself on how often or how well you're taking care of yourself in the domains of physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, relationships, professional, or work and overall balance. So what you do in these assessments is just look for patterns in your responses. For example, you might be more active in some areas of self-care, but ignore others. So it really is a way for you to just take a look at what it is that you are doing, how depleted you might be, and then areas or domains that you might need to strengthen or engage in activities that are along those lines. Another way to monitor your self-care needs is through feedback from personal friends, family members, and colleagues. Those who are closest to you may be able to see that you're in need of nourishment, so you may consider asking them to become your self-care accountability partner. Another wellness monitoring tool is a scale, and this scale is from our Idaho Wellness Journal. And the scale is similar to a pain scale with 0 on one end and 10 on the other. So 0 means that you're experiencing peace and serenity and no anxiety of any kind. 10, on the other hand, is our feelings are out of control. This scale can be used for you to ask yourself in any given moment, how intense are my feelings? It's a good idea before you get too far up on the scale to determine ahead of time what numbers are where you know that you need to stop what you're doing and engage in a self-care or enjoyable activity. For example, it might be that prevention is better self-care than trying to de-escalate yourself if you're feeling like an 8 or a 9. So it may be that when you're starting to feel a level 3, which would be upset, you notice something's not right, that you know you need to engage in self-care so it doesn't rise to where you're feeling much more discomfort than that. Alternatively, it may be that you work hard without much self-care until you reach a level 6 or 7, which is bad. Something should be done about the feeling or the beginning of freaking out. Sometimes that looks like you just really need to talk to someone and it's really hard to stop talking. It might be that at that point you take a vacation or a break. Or you may develop your own unique system for monitoring when you know that it's time for you to engage in self-care and enjoyable activities. If you feel that you are getting up and being in that higher end, feeling bad to the point that you think somebody ought to be doing something or that something ought to be done, then we encourage people to seek out counseling. Speaking of mental health, part of filling up your cup and taking care of yourself may mean talking to a professional counselor. And part of that might include overcoming myths that create barriers to seeking out services. So on the screen, we have 6 often shared myths about counseling. The first one is that counseling is only for people with severe problems. In fact, seeing a counselor does not mean that you're mentally ill or crazy. Everyone has difficulties at some point in their lives, and being able to ask for help is a sign of maturity, health, and strength. The second myth, seeking counseling is a sign of weakness. In fact, it takes courage to explore sensitive feelings and painful experiences. Individuals who enter counseling are taking the first step in resolving their difficulties. It is not a sign of weakness. Myth number 3, going to counseling means that I'm out of control. Actually, going to counseling is a way of taking control. Talking to a counselor is a great way to take control of your thoughts, your feelings, and actions, to gain additional skills and tools, and to make changes to improve your quality of life. Our mood and behavior impacts us and those people around us in our blast radius, if you will. An improved quality of life has obvious benefits for you and for those around you as well. Myth 4, counseling is a last resort. So most of us do not think that we have to experience a heart attack before we can see a physician. It is okay if we merely go to see someone if we have a sprained ankle. So the same logic applies to counseling. You don't have to have that emotional equivalent of a heart attack to seek a counselor. By working with a counselor, you can often get back on track much faster and save yourself a lot of unnecessary distress and actually prevent the emotional equivalent of a heart attack. Myth 5, I have a great family and supportive friends, and I don't need to talk to a counselor. In fact, that is somewhat true. Friends and family can be great sources of support and advice, and social support is one of the best mediators of stress and other psychological issues. However, these individuals can be too close to the situation to make them biased, likely in your favor. In fact, we like for them to be, but at the same time, they may be less able to really help you see a different perspective, a different solution, or help brainstorm something that may not be something that they've thought of. Myth number 6, the counselor will tell me what to do and how to fix my problems. So in counseling, it's not a quick fix, and counselors are not taught how to provide solutions or give advice. The counselor's role is to help you explore your thoughts and your concerns, evaluate those with what it is that you hold dear and true and what you value, and so that you can examine your options, and the counselor can then assist you in achieving the goals that you have set that works for you. You are the person that knows most about your life, and in you, you have the answer. We as counselors can help you develop the solution that's right for you.
Thank you,
So-
Dr. Bohecker.
Go ahead.
It seemed like I cut off the thought you were about to.
Well, I was going to, as we were talking about mental health and the myths of counseling, I wanted to share a little bit about the Counseling Center, and then provide some space and time for questions and answers. So just to say a little bit more about the Counseling Center, all of the clinicians are licensed professional counselors and can help clients on their journey towards better health. We offer in-person and telehealth appointments, and we serve people across Idaho, not just in the Treasure Valley. We accept most insurances and offer direct pay options, including discounts for people who are unable to pay or who are on Medicare. We really want to open this up, though, for questions and answers about how it is that when we present managing your mental health during the holidays, is there anything that has come up for you that you would like to talk about or have questions about and how to address?
Well, I personally found it very helpful in terms of getting clarity around feelings and sensations, and that it doesn't have to be, it's not a complex process necessarily, but a very mindful and awareness process. And the importance of boundary setting around all of this really resonated for me personally. Others?
I have something to ask. My name's Amy, and I was wondering if there's any brief ideas or resources that you could provide on grief during the holidays.
Go ahead, Monique.
When it comes to grief, I think that is the answer is yes. Of course, we would encourage if it's the type of grief that is complex or you're still working through your feelings associated with it, because grief is kind of like this, it's kind of like an iceberg and there's more things underneath it that you're not seeing or you're not delving into. And potentially it could be helpful to talk to a counselor to be able to break down what we just call grief into what are my thoughts, what are my feelings, and what's tangible. The thing about grief is it can often be so, we are trying to put our hands on something. And so working with a counselor might mean looking like doing some art, doing some journaling, doing some reflective work, so that then you can walk away and have something that you can look back and say, yes, what I was feeling was real in this moment. And the social support, I think, around grief also can't be so well. One component of this might be counseling. Another component would be how can you engage in a healthy social situation where you're able to talk about your grief, and there's possibilities there, maybe perhaps within groups around the community or within your church. So that's what I was going to say, Dr. Bohecker.
I think another component of grief is that it looks different on every person, or it impacts people differently. And whatever you're experiencing is normal. And that is, it is a blanket statement that some people want to hide, or some people want to stay alone, and other people need to be around people. The other thing is that it comes in waves. And so to know that it might feel like a tsunami or a tidal wave, and to know that it may dissipate and then it may come back, and it ebbs and flows. And to know that you're okay in the feelings, and to know when it becomes a clinical issue because there are both. And just know that there's no trajectory. There's no, some people have talked about stages of grief. There are different phases and stages, but it doesn't mean that once you're in one stage that you never experience any of the others, that it's not linear. And so I guess the one thing I would like to encourage anybody who's experiencing grief is to have compassion for yourself. There really is no getting over it. It's learning to live with the different ways that it manifests in our lives. There is a resource in a book that I would like to recommend, and it's called Tear Soup. And it really does normalize how grief looks and how it can look differently in different moments. And that's just one resource that I can recommend.
Thank you.
Excellent. I know for me as well, the grief was one of the feelings that came up around the overwhelming with the emotion. I lost both parents that first year of COVID after 8 or 9 years of caregiving for both of them. And so for me, I think one of the things is to get clear about what it is that I'm feeling, and that, yes, I am feeling sadness for the loss of both my parents. And then for me, one of the things that helps me is, and I know that's not true for everybody, but is to talk about it with my friends and family, and usually around the dining table, because that's where we do our best talking. And what my experience has been when that happens, because it happens most holidays, is that somehow the grief and talking about the feelings move from internal to and separation to a shared experience, and we end up talking about memories and good moments. And for me and my family, laughter then becomes a way to kind of honor and appreciate the grief that we're experiencing in the moment, and do something with it.
I'm glad you said that. I think it also highlights our values. So being able to recognize that for you, being able to sit around the dining room table, have that intimacy around with close family and friends that you can be vulnerable with, speaks to a value. And so for each person, being able to find these things that say, you know, potentially autonomy might speak to how somebody's able to cope with really difficult or intense feelings.
Absolutely.
Dr. Bohecker, I'm sorry, Dee, go ahead.
I recognize that's not an approach for everybody. It's just one that works for us. And you're right, it is a values thing of family and time together and sharing and being open. And so thank you for reiterating that.
I'm glad that you said it. It brought back memories of my sister and I sitting around a little Greek table right before an Elton John concert, and having that exact same tears and laughter and anticipation and joy and grief all happening at once.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Bohecker, I wondered if we could go back to the boundary slide, the one that was, it had the 2, and I wondered if you could talk about the Berlin Wall and the would you mind if I flipped back to that?
I think that what you may be referring to are, if we set boundaries aggressively, that it feels like the Berlin Wall. That it's concrete, it's rigid, and it's absolute, and it's in our tone and our affect. Don't talk to me that way. That's an example. Don't talk to me that way. We can also set boundaries as an example of the overgrown wall that's very soft. It does the same thing. It's a boundary, but the way that it's presented is in a very confident, kind, compassionate way. I'd appreciate it if wouldn't use those words around me.
I hadn't picked up on the imagery. In fact, I was a little struck. I was the starkness versus the richness of the beauty of the other wall with flowers and welcoming. So thank you for going back to clarify that. And it's a great metaphor for how we set boundaries, what it can end up looking like.
I think the other thing is that we need to practice. We have to try it. And because often we aren't taught how to do that, that's not something we learn in school, or often, you know, we just see people that can do it really well and think, wow, they just said no and I didn't even realize it. You know, they just really, but clearly, like it's not that you don't say clearly what you mean. It's that you can do it in a way that, you know, I would really love to. I would really love to do that presentation. And right now we already have a booking. You know, that kind of no, where no, we aren't going to do that. No, there's just the way to do it. And it's communicating the same thing, but we need to practice. So often that's something that we want, but there's no right way and there's no wrong way. Sometimes it's important to be the Berlin Wall, depending upon how many times the flowers have come out.
Well, and the other thing that I know about that is sometimes I do need to be the Berlin Wall right now. I'm not I would love to talk to you about what's going on with me. And right now I'm not in a place to be able to do that. Could we agree to talk about this tomorrow or in the next few days when it works best for both of us? So it's not always black or white. It can be a negotiation as well.
Absolutely. Well said.
Well, ladies, thank you
Sorry
both.
about that.
Any other comments, questions from our other live attenders today? Well, thank you both ladies so much for your presentation today. It was just wonderful and timely and just incredibly important that we have this conversation right now. I am going to stop sharing your screen and go back to my screen. And just again to say thank you so very much to the both of you. Somehow I've gotten clear back up here at slide 1. Oh, that's right there. So very timely, as I mentioned in the chat, that this presentation will be posted on our website along with any handouts that are provided in the next couple of days. So just give really Dara a few days to get this edited and up on our website. You will all receive an email about that so that you can go look at it again, perhaps share it with others that you think might be interested in this information, because I'm sure there's we all have people in our lives that we know could use a little more information around boundaries, boundary setting, and about taking care of self. And I know when I leave the presentation today, one of the things that I'm going to do to take care of myself is I'm going to put on my walking shoes and a bit of a jacket, and I'm going to go for a walk right now because it is so gorgeous out there. So before we leave, though, I would like to thank again our sponsors, Peggy Farnsworth, the retirement counselor, the coach, and thank you both of you to the counseling center. Now that I know where you're at, we'll be stopping by. I am a fond believer in therapy. Therapy feeds my soul, and I don't consider it a weakness. I consider it a strength, because to have other great people available to help you process and manage through whatever's going on for you can just be such a gift. So thank you both for the work that you do. I am a little bit challenged sometimes with Zoom. So getting to the right slide, Dr. Lynn Bohecker and Monique Barber. Appreciate you both so very much for what you're doing. And relative to our sponsors, these two sponsors have made this training. We're able to present this training to all of you free of charge because we have such great sponsors who really believe in the mission of Learn and help make that happen so that we can get the word out and let more people know about us and all of the education sessions that we have on our website. So I thank you very much, not only for your presentation today, but for your sponsorship. It means the world to us. Our values at Learn, our commitment to education and providing information in a timely manner to those who need it when they need it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Our attendees, as I said, will receive an email inviting you to join our mailing list. We never just add people to the mailing list. Just because you signed up doesn't mean you're on it. You need to make a confirmation that yes, you'd like to receive future community education flyers. Typically, we just send out one email a month. We're not out to spam you or drive you crazy like so many folks do. But to just make sure you know what's coming up and what's available. If you don't see that email within the next couple of days, please check your junk folder for your mailing list invitation. And coming up next, the next two and the last two sessions that we will have live in 22, hard to believe we're already saying the end of 22, is technology devices for older adults, the holiday edition. So we have our own Tina Barnett, who is a tech guru. She runs our Senior Planet computer training program that we have at the Boise Senior Center. And she's going to be talking about devices that can be really helpful and maybe some great Christmas presents for people in your life that would fit for. And then our last presentation of the year is about durable medical equipment options. So DME, durable medical equipment is one of those things you don't know what it is until you need it or someone you know needs it. But this is equipment that can be useful just to make it safe to live in your own home, mobility, lots of tools, includes everything from hospital beds to ramps to get up into your doors. So John from Norco will be our presenter on the 6th. So that's what we've got coming up for you. So I look forward to seeing you all soon. And again, thanks for being with us today.